Perseverance always pays off. Or does it? I have visited this location 4 different times, chasing one photograph that only exists for a few minutes under the right conditions. Most attempts failed, but tonight might finally be the one. If you remember my last video, I visited the location and said that I'd have to come back when the conditions are right. The time has come. I'm back at Chesterton Windmill. A few days ago, I returned to scout the location again and noticed that the wet field surrounding the windmill had finally turned a beautiful golden yellow. It looked exactly as I'd been hoping. After enjoying lunch beside the windmill, I spent some time walking around looking for the best composition. For this, I used my Sony a5100 camera, which I always carry around as it is very small and lightweight. I took a couple of photos and I was feeling optimistic. The forecast looked promising for sunset, so I decided to come back later that evening. What I hadn't considered was that it was Friday. As you might expect, there were plenty of people around enjoying the evening. It was a little windy too, but it was still a beautiful sunset, so I decided to make the most of it. I took a few photos, but I quickly realized the golden hour wasn't going to give me the image I had in mind. The nearby hills and trees were casting shadows across the wet field, and those dark patches completely spoiled the clean, minimalist look I was after. With the wind picking up and people still walking around the windmill, I decided not to wait for sunset afterglow. Instead, I headed home, knowing I'd have to come back yet again. I really wanted to photograph this windmill in the best possible light, so next time I decided to try sunrise instead. A couple of days later, before work, I was back here for an early morning shoot. The conditions couldn't have been much better. Clear skies, almost no wind, and beautiful, soft light. Around the summer solstice, sunrise is incredibly early, so I assumed I would have the place all to myself. I was wrong. Even at 4:30 in the morning, there were already people here. Thankfully, they left just as I was ready to start shooting. By this point, I had already decided that the windmill worked best in portrait composition, so that's what I was focused on. I photographed it both before sunrise, when everything was bathed in that soft blue and pink glow, and again after the sun had risen, when the warm light illuminated the windmill itself. A few days later, I came back again for another sunset. It was a Thursday, so I expected it to be much quieter. Somehow, there were even more people than before. At this point, I was starting to wonder if the windmill had become a local evening meeting spot. The weather wasn't quite cooperating either. High clouds covered much of the sky, making it difficult to know whether the sunset would deliver the light I was hoping for. Still, I arrived about an hour before sunset and planned to stay right through the afterglow, just in case. Fortunately, as the evening went on, the sky began to clear. The light improved, the warm colors finally appeared, and I was able to capture the photograph I'd been waiting for. Let's talk a bit about how I composed this image and what was important. For this composition, simplicity is everything. The windmill is the only subject in the frame, so its position becomes critical. I was using portrait orientation because it emphasizes the height of the windmill while allowing just enough of the wet field to balance the foreground. The clean horizon and uncluttered background help keep the viewer's attention exactly where I want it. I used a relatively long focal length to simplify the scene and compress the perspective slightly. As for camera settings, fairly narrow aperture to keep everything sharp from front to back. ISO stays at its lowest value and the shutter speed changes depending on the available light. At this stage, the most important ingredient is in the camera settings. It's the right light. Over several visits, I ended up photographing the windmill in almost every type of light. Golden hour, sunrise, the soft colors before dawn, and finally the warm glow after sunset. Each version has its own character. Some emphasize the texture of the wet, while others simplify the scene into little more than shape and color. It's interesting how the same composition can feel completely different simply because the light has changed. Please let me know in the comment which one you prefer and why. Coming back to the same location again and again can sometimes be frustrating. You don't always come home with the photograph you imagine. But every visit teaches you something. You learn how the light behaves, how the landscape changes through the seasons, and which conditions simply don't work. Sometimes the photograph you are chasing only appears after several failed attempts, and sometimes perseverance does really pay off. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. May the light be with you all.